The night my mother called me a failure was the same night I learned how quiet a heart can break. It happened on Friday, 8:12 p.m., at a dinner table that smelled of roasted chicken and old, unresolved tension. I remember the way the ceiling light flickered once, just once, before settling into a steady glow, as if even the house knew what was coming. Her words didn't explode. They landed softly, too softly, almost like she was delivering a diagnosis. "You're a failure," she said, folding her napkin with slow, measured fingers. I didn't blink. Not because it didn't hurt, but because I'd run out of places inside me where hurt could go. The betrayal wasn't new. But the timing was. Earlier that same afternoon, at 3:47 p.m., I had received news that already left my world hanging by a thread. A piece of mail, thin and harmless-looking, containing the final confirmation that the person I trusted most in my life had been lying to me for months. A betrayal that had cost me more than money. It had cost me trust, sleep, and a version of myself I would never get back. So when my mother struck next, just hours later, it felt less like an attack and more like the world whispering, "Let go." I sat silent while relatives passed dishes, while spoons tapped plates, while conversations struggled to pretend everything was normal. It wasn't. My mother leaned back, satisfied with the blow she'd delivered. Someone laughed nervously. Someone else reached for water. My siblings looked away, pretending they hadn't heard, but I had heard everything. Her words. The betrayal earlier that day. The months of secrets. The debt she didn't know I knew about. The payments she assumed were taken care of by fate or luck. I wiped my fingers on a napkin, placed it neatly beside my plate, and lifted my eyes to hers. Slow, deliberate, unshaken. "Mom," I said quietly, "before you finish calling me a failure, there's something you should know." Every fork froze midair. Every conversation snapped shut. And as I watched the confusion begin to flicker in her eyes, I realized something chilling. This was only the first crack, because the truth I was about to reveal wouldn't just change the dinner. It would change everything that came after. Before everything collapsed, my life used to feel almost ordinary, not perfect, not cinematic, just steady in a way that lets you believe you're safe. I grew up in a small house on a quiet street where the evenings always smelled like cumin and old wood, and the walls carried every laughter, every argument, every secret. My mother wasn't cruel then, or maybe she was, but in smaller doses. Sharp remarks softened with a smile, criticism disguised as concern. Back then, I didn't understand the difference. I remember mornings where she'd hum while making tea, tapping the spoon against the cup like she was keeping time with some private rhythm. My siblings and I would sit on the floor doing homework while she reminded us, again and again, that we were supposed to make her proud one day. And I tried. That was the strange part. I always tried. When I left home to build my life, I left with hope strapped to my back like a fragile suitcase. I worked long hours, studied late, sacrificed weekends, believing that if I just held on long enough, everything would finally make sense. I called home every night. I sent money when I could. I bought groceries whenever I visited, pretending not to notice how quickly the bags emptied. I thought we were a family pulling in the same direction. I even imagined a future where things would get easier. A better job, a warmer home, a family of my own someday. I carried those dreams quietly, protecting them from reality the way you shield a candle flame with your palms. But slowly, almost silently, the cracks began to spread. First, it was the conversations with my mother. Shorter, colder, like she was always rushing somewhere I wasn't invited. She stopped asking how my day was, stopped listening when I spoke. Calls turned into reminders, requests for money, errands, favors, all delivered in a tone that felt less like need and more like expectation, as if my usefulness was the only part of me worth acknowledging. Then came the arguments, small, sharp, always about things that never mattered. I would bring home dinner. She'd say it wasn't enough. I'd pay a bill. She'd say it was late. I'd try to talk. She'd sigh like I was wasting her time, But the biggest distance wasn't in the words. It was in the silence that followed them. Silence when I told her I was exhausted. Silence when I shared my plans. Silence when I tried to explain I was doing the best I could. Her eyes would glaze over, like I was a channel she no longer watched. There were symbolic things too, the kind you don't notice until they start piling up. My birthday went unmentioned for the first time, then the second. Old family photos disappeared from the living room. She forgot the name of the project I spent months working on. She changed the Wi-Fi password and didn't share it, shrugging when I asked. "It slipped my mind," she said. That was her favorite line. Slowly, I realized I wasn't part of her world anymore. I was just a utility, and then something inside me shifted. Quietly at first. One night, I visited unannounced and noticed a letter on the kitchen counter. My name in small, printed letters, but the address was hers. When I picked it up, she snatched it away so fast you'd think it was burning her fingers. "Nothing important," she said, stuffing it deep into the drawer beside the stove. Her voice trembled for just half a second, not long enough for anyone else to notice, but long enough for me. That was when the uneasy feeling began. A single detail. A single slip, but small things can be louder than screams. A few days later, I tried to log into the shared utility account I had set up years ago to help her out. Water, gas, electricity. The password didn't work. Then the recovery email didn't work. Then the secondary security question had been changed. Someone had locked me out. I should have ignored it. I should have told myself it was a mistake, but something in me whispered, "Look closer," so I did. I checked my bank statement. A few auto payments were higher than usual. Nothing dramatic, nothing bold, just a gradual climb, small increases hidden among grocery purchases and commuting costs. Like someone counting on me not to notice. I stared at the screen for a long minute, listening to the hum of my refrigerator, the ticking of the wall clock, the distant sound of traffic outside my window. Everything in my apartment looked normal, but something in my life wasn't. That night, I lay awake replaying every cold conversation, every changed password, every avoided question. I stared at the ceiling until the room grew pale with morning light. By then, one thought had firmly rooted itself. Something in my family was being hidden from me. And whatever it was big enough to make my mother rewrite her entire behavior toward me. I didn't know the full truth yet, but I knew this. The next time I visited that house, I would find my answer. And someone in that house wasn't ready for that. The truth didn't arrive like thunder. It arrived quietly, in the soft blue glow of my laptop screen at 11:19 p.m., on a night when the rain tapped gently against my window, as if trying to warn me before I clicked. I remember the room being dim, just the desk lamp, a warm circle of light holding back the darkness around me. I wasn't looking for anything dramatic. I only wanted to confirm the strange charges I'd noticed earlier. A routine check. A simple login. Nothing more, but betrayal loves ordinary moments. It hides in them. The first email that caught my attention wasn't even unread. It sat there in my inbox, marked as seen, though I had never opened it. Subject line, final notice, overdue balance. At first, I assumed it was spam. But the sender name made my throat tighten. It was the electricity provider, the same account my mother swore she had under control. My hand paused on the mouse. A slow, uneasy chill spread across my arms. When I clicked the message, the page loaded slowly, line by line, like the truth wanted to take its time, harming me. The overdue balance wasn't small. It wasn't recent either. It had been accumulating for months, and every payment that had gone through, every last one, came from my bank card. Except, I hadn't authorized them. I stared at the numbers, the dates, the payment IDs. My heartbeat grew heavy, almost painful. All this time, while my mother lectured me about being irresponsible, ungrateful, useless, she was draining my account behind my back. I scrolled down slowly. My eyes caught another detail. One that made everything inside me go still. Someone had changed the billing email and the recovery phone number. Both were replaced with my mother's information. My name remained on the account only because it couldn't be removed without the original ID. I clicked through more statements. More bills. More auto payments. More money quietly disappearing. My money. 1,000 small betrayals disguised as routine transactions. Then, as if the universe wanted to seal the moment, another email slid into my inbox at the top. A new message. Timestamp 11:23 p.m. Thank you for your payment. Another deduction. Another bill. Another lie. For a long, breathless minute, I didn't move. I sat in the dark, illuminated only by the faint glow of the screen. The rain outside grew heavier, streaking across the window like falling threads of silver. The room felt too quiet, an empty room heavy with the weight of realization. My mind didn't scream. My chest didn't heave. No dramatic collapse, just silence. A deep, cold silence. One by one, memories flashed in my mind like a film reel spinning out of control, my mother accusing me of never helping, never contributing. Her sudden defensiveness, the changed passwords, the secretive envelope she snatched away, the tone she used when she thought I wasn't looking. My hands steadied. My breathing slowed. Shock gave way to something sharper than anger and heavier than grief. Clarity. If she had asked me for help, I would have given it. Gladly. The way I always did. But to siphon from me behind my back, to accuse me of failure while living off the very money she stole, that required a different kind of cruelty. I leaned back in my chair. The leather felt cold against my spine. In the faint reflection on the laptop screen, I could see my face, tired, pale, but strangely calm. A version of me that had stopped expecting honesty from anyone. My inner voice whispered through the quiet. So this is what you've become to them. A wallet, a scapegoat, a convenient villain. The rain softened again, tapping lightly like fingertips on glass. Somewhere outside, a car passed, its headlights casting a brief glow into my room before fading. For the first time in months, I felt something inside me settle. Not peace, not acceptance, just decision. I closed the email tab. Then the statements. Then the browser. Each click felt like closing a door. I didn't plan revenge in that moment. I didn't imagine scenes, confrontations, or victories. I only knew one thing with absolute certainty. A truth that formed itself like a steady breath following a long, suffocating silence. I won't fight back in anger, I said to the empty room, voice low and steady. I'll wait, because anger burns quickly. But patience? Patience rearranges the entire story. After the storm, you learn to move in silence. That was the first rule I set for myself. No outbursts, no accusations, no desperate bargaining. Anger is loud. Revenge is quiet. I stopped reacting and started listening. The first thing I did was inventory. Not of feelings, of facts. I made lists on a single, empty notebook that I kept under my mattress. Names, dates, small details I could verify. A dinner that never happened. A gift that went missing. A weekend trip that became a work commitment. I wrote everything down in the same neat hand that had once filled our shared calendar with birthdays and dentist appointments. The ritual steadied me. It converted chaos into cells on a page I could control. I watched patterns. The late-night texts that appeared at 2:13 a.m. every Thursday. The sudden interest in a new friend who coincidentally liked the same restaurant as we used to. I traced them back to small habits. The way he left his laptop open with one tab showing. The way she always pocketed her phone when I walked into the kitchen. Little things, but pattern grows from little things. I began cross-referencing receipts, public posts, a single photograph with a reflection somewhere in the background. I learned the truth of patience. The more you wait, the more people reveal themselves. I made allies, but only ones I could trust with paper trail minds. An old college friend who still worked in IT, a neighbor who earned a living in legal filings, a barista who remembered how she'd ordered coffee that afternoon. I didn't tell them a story. I asked questions. When you want data, don't give people drama. Give them specifics. Do you remember seeing this car at noon on July 8th? Do you have a copy of that invoice? People like to help when you make it easy for them to say yes. Technology became my quiet partner. I taught myself to read metadata like a language. File names, timestamps, even the subtle differences in photo resolution and compression told me where an image had been taken, and sometimes where it had been edited. My friend from IT showed me how to export message threads, how deleted messages often left a footprint in backups. It was tedious, almost clinical, the opposite of how my heart had felt the night I learned the betrayal. That was the point. I wanted clarity, not catharsis. I set small traps. Not traps of cruelty, but tests. I sent a harmless, vague text from a newly created account and watched which number replied. I called pretending to be a service provider and listened for hesitations. I asked a mutual connection about plans that never existed and watched the web of excuses form. In a courtroom, lawyers call these impeachment by inconsistency. In private life, I called it patience paying for itself. There were nights I almost fell back into old routines, leaving a cup of tea on the counter like we used to, setting 2 plates out by reflex. I forced myself to keep the cups stacked, the plates in the cabinet. Every small restraint was training for the moment when I would need to be colder than the person who had hurt me. That was a strange private discipline, to conserve warmth, to study sorrow until sorrow was a tool rather than a wound. I also began to secure my own life. Passwords changed. Automatic payments redirected. I transferred accounts that had still borne both our names into single ones I controlled. It felt bureaucratic and necessary, like sealing a door while I mapped the rest of the house. Protecting myself wasn't a dramatic act. It was practical stewardship of the life that remained. At the same time, I learned the power of small, recorded truths. I carried a voice memo app in my pocket and used it sparingly. A recorded conversation about a promise unkept, the tone of an offhand apology, the precise wording that would expose intent later. I annotated each file in my notebook with one-line descriptions and exact times. I labeled them not with emotion, but with utility. July 14th, I never said I loved you. 9:42 p.m. Keeping it clinical kept the drama from poisoning the evidence. Confrontations were staged like moves in a chess game. I arranged for neutral meetings that appeared casual but served a purpose: to observe, to listen, to gather the one sentence that would collapse the alibis. I tested witnesses with offhand questions. I let people talk until they contradicted themselves. When they did, I recorded it. When they laughed too loudly or looked away at the exact same moment I asked about a certain date, I circled that detail and went back to it later. There were missteps. A payment I thought had cleared but bounced back. A file corrupted and lost for an hour that felt like an entire year. Each time, I stepped back and reworked my approach. I could afford to be methodical because I had time. I had traded the immediacy of anger for the slow, sickening satisfaction of certainty. And while I gathered facts, I also rehearsed how I would sit across from them when the time came. I imagined my face calm and contained, the voice that had once wavered now steady. I planned the sequence, documents on the table, the voice memo played, the receipts, the text exports. No theatrics, only undeniable proof laid out like a simple ledger. The goal wasn't to humiliate. It was to make truth unavoidable. By the end of those long weeks, a pattern emerged like a map I could finally read. I had what I needed. I had allies, records, and the quiet certification that my life would no longer be carried on someone else's deception. I gathered everything into a single folder, a folder heavier than any guilt I'd felt before. I closed the notebook one evening, tucked it under the mattress next to the folder, and stood at the window watching the city settle into its small, indifferent lights. My hands were steady. My breath was calm. I had not allowed myself to be broken. I had become an architect of consequence. Justice didn't begin with shouting. It began with a door closing, a soft click, final, deliberate, as I stepped into my mother's living room on a quiet Saturday afternoon. Sunlight fell across the carpet in long gold stripes. The house smelled like detergent and old memories. My siblings were home. My uncle was visiting. It was the kind of afternoon where nothing dramatic is supposed to happen. That was exactly why I chose it. My mother was in the kitchen rinsing dishes when she heard the door and looked over her shoulder. The moment her eyes met mine, something in her expression tightened, like a rope pulled quick. She sensed the stillness in me, the kind of stillness that isn't peace but preparation. "Why are you here?" she asked. Not angry, not curious, guarded. I placed a folder on the dining table, neatly, calmly. "We need to talk." The room shifted. My uncle paused mid-conversation. My siblings looked up from their phones. My mother dried her hands on a towel that suddenly wouldn't stay still. "What's that?" she asked. "Your bills," I said softly. Her face froze. I pulled the first paper from the folder. A printed statement, highlighted neatly in yellow. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't rush. I set it on the table like a teacher placing an exam in front of a student. "This is the overdue balance from the electricity account. The one you changed the email on. The one you locked me out of. The one paid with my bank card for the past 8 months. Her jaw clenched. A tiny twitch, but I had learned to watch the small things. "That's not," she began. I lifted a second paper. Then a third. Water bill, gas bill, credit notices, each stamped with my name, her email, my money. "You told everyone I was useless," I said. "You called me a failure at dinner. But every time you said it, you were spending my money." My siblings looked between us, eyes widening as the truth unfolded in quiet, methodical layers. No yelling, no theatrics. Just evidence. Impossible. Undeniable evidence. Then I pressed play on my phone. A recording, one I'd captured weeks earlier. My mother's voice echoed through the room. "I'll handle the bills. If they don't notice the payments changing, good. They never pay attention." The room went still. My mother moved quickly, too quickly, reaching for the phone, but I stepped back. Not aggressively, just enough for her to understand the boundary. "No," I said. "You've taken enough." My uncle leaned forward, brows heavy with disappointment. "Why would you do this?" he asked her. "Not me." Her. It was the first time anyone in the family had directed judgment her way instead of mine. A subtle shift, but enormous. My mother's voice trembled. I had no choice. I was struggling. "I know," I said quietly. "And if you had asked me, I would have helped. The way I always did. But you chose lies over honesty, theft over trust." The silence that followed pressed into every corner of the room. Then came the next reveal. I reached into the folder again and placed a single sheet of paper on the table, a copy of the agreement I had. Transferred the utilities into my own name. Her eyes widened. "I've cleared the debts," I said. "All of them. They're no longer tied to me." She blinked, confusion slipping into fear. "You cleared them?" "Yes, and I also closed your access to my accounts, permanently." A soft gasp came from one of my siblings. It wasn't a dramatic sound. More like a balloon deflating, slow, disappointing. My mother sank slowly into the chair behind her. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her. Not weak, just unmasked. "And that's not all," I continued, with a calmness that surprised even me. I turned to my uncle. He had always been the respected elder, the voice of reason in the family. "I need you to hear this," I said, handing him the statements. "Because she has told everyone that I don't contribute, that I don't help, that I fail her." He scanned the papers, his eyes darkening with each line. When he looked at my mother, his expression had changed into something firm, disappointed, sharp, unavoidable. "You owe your child an apology," he said to her. "A real one." My mother's breath caught. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Pride fought shame. Shame fought truth. I saw the entire battle in her trembling hands. "I'm not here for an apology," I said softly. "I'm here for honesty, the thing we stopped having years ago." She looked up at me. And for the first time in my life, she didn't have a single prepared line, a single excuse. A single story to twist, just silence. Then I delivered the final strike, the one she never saw coming. I pulled out a small envelope and placed it in front of her. "What's this?" she asked. "The payments you did make," I said. "The few times you tried." I kept them. Every receipt, every transfer, because I wanted to remember that even in the lies, a part of you was still trying. My voice didn't break. It didn't rise. It simply existed, plain, human, unthreatened. "I'm not here to punish you," I said. "I'm here to end the cycle." My mother covered her face with her hands, shoulders shaking. Not loudly, not dramatically. Quiet, helpless shaking, the kind that comes when denial can no longer protect you. I stepped back, letting the room breathe. Justice had already happened. Not through destruction. Through truth, through exposure, through accountability, through the simple, undeniable evidence of what she had done. My mother whispered, "I'm sorry." Barely audible. But real, I nodded once. Not victory, acknowledgement. Then, I turned toward the door, because sometimes justice isn't about watching them fall. It's about watching yourself finally rise. The knob felt cool in my hand as I pulled the door open. The house behind me fell into a deep, heavy quiet. And as I stepped outside, into clean air, into sunlight that felt strangely new, one thought settled in my mind with calm certainty. The days after it all settled were quiet, almost painfully so. I woke up without the tension knotting my shoulders, without the familiar ache of trying to please someone who never noticed. The house felt different, lighter somehow, as if the air itself had been set free from the weight of unspoken truths. I found myself lingering at the windows, watching the sun crawl across the walls, savoring the little moments I had overlooked for so long. The way my coffee steamed in the morning light, the soft hum of traffic outside, the laughter of children from the street. Life, it seemed, had paused and finally allowed me to breathe. People I hadn't spoken to in years reached out tentatively, as if drawn by some invisible thread. I realized that I had been hiding in plain sight, pretending to be small while carrying storms inside. Now I didn't have to. I met friends for long walks, journaled my thoughts, and even laughed at things I used to ignore. There was no grand celebration, no dramatic moment of victory, just quiet acknowledgement that I had reclaimed my dignity and my life. Sometimes, when I look back, I remember the nights spent replaying the betrayal in my head, each thought sharper than the last. I wonder if I would have handled it differently, if the anger had been stronger, if I had acted impulsively. But I smile at that memory now because I know this. Revenge isn't about breaking someone else, it's about rebuilding yourself. Every calculated step, every silent observation, every patience-testing moment led me here, to clarity and calm. I learned that strength doesn't roar. It moves with subtle certainty. Justice isn't always about punishment. It's about truth being seen and balance being restored. And peace, real peace, comes not from victory over someone else, but from victory over your own fear, doubt, and resentment. I carry no malice anymore, only lessons etched deep into my being, and the quiet confidence that I am enough, always. In the end, I understand that life doesn't always give closure on a silver platter, but it rewards those who wait, who observe, who act with intention. And sometimes the sweetest revenge is simply walking forward with grace, leaving the past behind. They called me a failure at dinner, but now, I smile knowing I never was. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like and subscribe for more emotional journeys that leave you thinking long after the video ends.